Canada have played their final two friendlies before Copa America, and Alex, we're here today to try to figure out what the final roster could look like because we know that there was 26 players originally brought into camp. Canny time was added for 27. We saw him get some minutes, but basically there has to be some changes because there were some big players that were not included in this camp, and there's also too many players, so someone has to go. So we saw a mixed bag of results. The 4-0 thrashing against the Netherlands after a promising first half, followed up by a 0-0 draw against France to just pretty much make all the Canadians fired up going into Copa America. And we absolutely love to see it. So what we're going to do quickly, we're going to reminisce on the good times. We're going to talk about a couple players who had a big stock up. So Alex, begin. Give me a player who you think had a really good showing and their stock rose.
We'll start easy with Moise Bombito. I think we were expecting big things at center back, or maybe hoping for big things. Expect's a strong word. You're hoping for good things, translate his form from Colorado, show the potential that he has, and he did that. He showed why he looks like someone who could be the future of this back line, right? A Stephen Vittori replacement in size, but certainly not in speed. It's an upgrade in that regard, and he's good on the ball, has all those attributes, and he showed it. And I think that was huge to see. It's not easy for, at the end of the day, he's been in MLS. You haven't had that chance to make that step up. I know we've made the argument in the past that defenders in MLS actually have a pretty hard job because you are playing DP level talents that are out of place in Europe. But it is a difference going up against an Mbappe and some of these other talents. He did pretty well in that audition. In the first game, was really not the center back's fault that they conceded four. It was a lot of breakdowns out wide. And in the second game, you keep a clean sheet against a loaded French attack. Bombito was excellent. And he showed a little bit of possession, showed his speed, showed all his attributes. I think he's someone who's going to be starting some games at Copa America now.
Bombito, Alex has been on his train since day one, so it's fantastic to see that he's basically going to be the future, I believe, at the right side center back position. I'm going to go to my guy, Liam Miller. I've been talking about Liam Miller for a very, very long time, and this system just looks like it works for him. They went with the 4-4-2, and because Davies is playing at left back, it finally opens up a position. And Alex and I have said it so many times, it's a shame that, Liam plays the position he does because Davies is in his way. Well, changing things up, you get someone who just brings so much energy. He's so direct. Like I said, he fits Jesse's system, and like he's a bit of a wild card. And if you've watched Liam over the years, you know that he can create something out of nothing. And we saw that against France, against the number 2 ranked team in the world. We saw him go onto that dangerous right foot of his, take an absolute rocket off the bar. He can create those kind of magics, and it's like having a wild card, but he can also play the system that Jesse wants. I'm excited for him, and I think he's one of I would say he's probably the player who's going to benefit the most from Jesse coming in. And I think this has been a fantastic start for him.
Yeah, I love that Miller Davies partnership. You get speed in the attack. You get a lefty, a righty. You can kind of combine underlap, overlap, and defensively they look both very good. It's nice to have two. Miller's become a wing back now in terms of his experience. You got Davies who can of course play across pitch. I like that combination a lot. Another name, if I'm going to move on, is Ismail Kone. He's someone who heading into this camp we didn't know where he'd fit. We wondered might he be better as a 10. But he showed that he's grown a lot this year defensively for Watford. He was an absolute defensive machine in this camp, a new side of his game. And of course, he was just magic on the ball. Really, like that's the only way to put it. The way he was turning, gliding. There was a compilation that went viral on Twitter after the France game of him just, bossing a 2-time UCL winner in Eduardo Camavinga. It was quite the sight to behold. So I think Ismail Kone showed that there are no doubts about where he fits in this Jesse Marsch system and that he's going to be a standout player for years to come under his new manager.
Now, Alex and I have had this debate of whether, Dane St. Clair's stock actually changed at all, but I believe Crepeau's did because, it looked like maybe Dane would have an opportunity to push for him. He had, I'd say, a mixed bag in that Netherlands match, some really good moments, some not so great moments, but Crepeau was sensational. We've talked about how we believe he's the next man up. I guess going into camp, nothing really changed. We thought he was going to be the starter. He went and put a clean sheet against France. It's not easy to do. He made some big saves. He looked strong. He looked like he came off his line well. And, like we always say, he's an excellent shot stopper. And on top of it, he's good with the ball at his feet. So I believe beforehand he was the right man for the job. And then after seeing this performance, there's no question. He's the starter. His stock, I'd say right now, is probably through the roof after a performance like that.
Yeah, and he showed great, leadership. For example, there is a young backline in front of him, and he did well to lead, and that's maybe an edge that he has. Whereas him and St. Clair, their numbers hard to split them in MLS this year. St. Clair, in fact, has the edge, maybe in some of the advanced numbers, but then Crepeau has that experience. And I think he showed it with just how calm of a presence he was. Otherwise, just kind of emptying the notebook here of guys to keep an eye on. I think you have to give a shout to Derek Cornelius. He was very good across both games. Finally took I feel like he took a big step forward, because the last few times there's been a push with his form to get him a start, but then maybe, like in Japan where he only got 45 and didn't show the best. There's been other moments where he just hasn't been able to grab a spot. I felt like he grabbed his spot this time, and that Cornelius Bombito pair is one to watch. And another name we'll just throw in because it's something where there's stiff competition up front. Yet it feels like Jacob Schaffelberg's going to go to Copa America because he brings something. He's electric. It's dynamic. It's speed. It's the mullet. Something about him when he gets on the field, dangerous things happen, and I think you're going to need that in a Copa America against some dangerous teams. So, shout out to Schaffelberg, one of the highest jersey sellers in MLS this year, but he deserves it with some of his play.
He's number 13. I was just about to say that point. So there you go. The Mullet Man, we absolutely love him. So now let's take a look at some players who are on the bubble from the players that were included in this 27-player roster. And the first two that come to my mind, Alex, is Brim and Zator. Both were subbed into the match against the Netherlands in the 56th minute. So they got a pretty solid look. I would say out of the two, clearly like Zator struggled, had a couple of pretty big mistakes, led to goals. Brim, I didn't think Brim was poor at all coming on. I just think he's in such a tough competition with David Larin, Hugo Bear. I mean, there's some players that weren't included, like Russell Rowe. We had Tanny, who was included last minute. I feel like it just might be a little bit too much for Brim, and this was an opportunity to get Jesse to take a look at him. And I just don't think he did enough to probably impress. So those are the two number one players right now who are on the bubble for me. Do you want to? We have some more on here, but just to touch on those two, Alex, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Dominic Zator, there's lots to like with this profile, and we talked about it heading into this camp, but I just don't think he had the chance to stand out, especially that he made a few routine mistakes. Struggled a bit in possession against the Netherlands. I think it's something where already with Richie Larea showing that he looked good in his cameo, that he looks fit. You trust that Johnston, Larea can do the job at right back. You could throw Tejan Buchanan back there if needed. Zator was really going to have to stand out, especially because you cut him. Maybe you can bring a true center back. Maybe you can bring another midfielder. Zator was kind of used as a flexibility piece. So it's harsh, but that's what happens in a sample size like this. And as for Brim, similar. Brim wasn't actually that bad against another. No. He was pretty solid. The thing is, in a crowded front line, you needed to stand out. You needed to really have maybe a statement, and he didn't get that chance to do that. And I think when you look at other guys, like a Schaffelberg has shown he can be electric off the bench. There's just a million strikers right now, it seems, up front. We're not even getting half of it in this discussion. We're going to touch on a few of them. Brim just, I think, missed an opportunity to stand out. So it's fair that I think we might see both of them kind of, pushed to the wayside.
I agree. And then speaking of the front, it's the most confused. I mean, it's a 26-player roster, so it's expanded, and we play a 2-striker system. But I mean, there's 6, 7 strikers, maybe 8. I lost count of who could potentially even make this. So I would like to see it max 5. And I still feel like that's still very crowded. So 2 players that, didn't feature much. You had Tanny coming off the bench for 7 minutes against France, which he was obviously the late call-in, but he's been lighting up MLS right now, which he gets his deserved call-up. He is a dual nat, 24. I don't know how much that's going to play into maybe bringing him to this tournament and officially cap tying him. And then Theo Bair, over 2 matches after a fantastic season with Motherwell, didn't play a single minute. And, is that because Jesse's comfortable with him and they wanted to see someone like Brim, who, like I said, came on in the 56th minute, which was a ton of opportunity for him. So there's a couple of question marks surrounding those two, because I think they're also bubble players. What do you make of that situation?
Yeah, it's so crowded. It's like, to the Brim point, right? It just feels like you need to stand out because there's these situations like Tani Oluwasi has been having a phenomenal season so far in Minnesota. I think he's up to 7 goals, 4 assists in like 600 minutes, which is absurd for that production, and like how consistent he's been. Like, I don't think he's scored a brace yet. It's just constantly like goal, 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 goal. Like, that's the sort of consistency you want. Sometimes a striker, you have a 3-goal game, then you go quiet for 5, but then you're like, oh, I scored 3 goals in 6 games. No, Tanny is just goal, 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 goal. And you add in that he's a dual national. He brings something a bit different to the front line, right? Like a bit of a fox in the box. You're kind of intrigued by him. I think it's something that's why Marsh brought him in. That's why Marsh threw him out there. I think that could help him in this race for Copa America. As for Theo Bair, I'd like to hope that it's just you wanted to look at a 10. You want to look at a Brim maybe who you're not so confident where he fits. You want to look at some of those other guys because you would have thought Theo Bair deserved a shot. He had such a good season at Motherwell, and plus, to the point about profiles, he brings such a different profile with his size. He can bring hold up, he can bring speed, he can bring something different. I would have loved to see him come on and battle with the Van Dijk or duel with a Saliba Meccano in that France game. I thought it was a bit unfortunate he did it. I thought he deserved it, but I think that heading into Copa America, you'd have to feel pretty confident about him. Although it is a bit of a worrying sign, I'd say it's fair to say that he didn't play at all, especially because he didn't play in March. He hasn't played in a while. He is a dual national too. You have to remember that he isn't cap tied. Those are all factors you're kind of thinking about.
Yeah, he only has the one cap. I would rather see guys that are almost going and maybe judge what maybe Brim or others could do in training. But who knows what Jesse's thinking? Maybe we're wrong. Maybe Bair is one of the odd man's out. That's why we included him. Ugbo also didn't get any minutes too, by the way. So it's hard to judge. Two other players I think in the backline that could be on the line is Luc de Fougerolles, mainly because he's a U20. I don't think, honestly, even if he gets brought to Copa America, he would feature in this tournament. I just think it's a fantastic experience for him to be included, although there is the U20s. So you have that debate. He'd probably he could be captain that side, almost play every match. He would be so important for the U20s this summer in that tournament, or you bring the experience of Copa America. And there's also Kyle Hebert, who I thought only coming on playing 7 minutes against France didn't look overly good. Although, like we said, I believe Jesse Marsch does like the profile of Kyle Hebert, and there's not a lot of CB depth. That's the issue. You have Bombito, Cornelius as your starters. You got Miller, who's a great option off the bench, and then all of a sudden you're running into Hebert is basically your fourth guy, and could be that right-sided center back, or Luc de Fougerolles, who, like I just mentioned, I don't believe if he goes to the tournament he'll probably play. If he does, maybe a couple minutes. I don't know, Alex. Out of those two, what did you see?
I'll start with Hebert. I thought he was okay against France. Actually, I think the one thing you could see is just he's slow. He's not slow. Slow's not the wrong word, but he looked slow because he came in, and it's like, all right, Kyle, here's your assignment. Fresh Kingsley Coman, who came off the bench 15 minutes earlier, and I thought that maybe didn't play into his favor, but he still made a big tackle against him. I thought he held his own. He didn't make any glaring mistakes. And I think Hebert has a bit of an edge in this squad just because of that left back question. The reality is, there's a reason why Alphonso Davies played there this camp when you thought he would play further up the pitch. There is a bit of lack of depth there with Sam Adekugbe battling injuries. You'd love to see Adekugbe in the squad. Hopefully he can squeeze in. We just don't know if he'll be able to. If that ends up being the case, especially there might be games where you want to push Davies forward because you're going to need a bit more spark offensively. Hebert could, someone who could slot in, familiar with this Red Bull system, like we've mentioned many times. Plus, he gives you another body at center back. So the team is a bit light at center back. Say especially if you do drop out as the tour, I think Hebert does have an edge in that regard. So I think his 7 minutes, I think it was okay, and his position helps him. De Fougerolles is the real interesting one because there are genuinely two schools of thought here, and to be honest, like I don't lean one or the other. Usually you kind of do, right? I think there's immense benefits to both. Of course, like you mentioned, one is send them to the U20s. They have a huge CONCACAF qualifying tournament this summer where they can finally reach a U20 World Cup for the first time in forever. De Fougerolles, if he goes there, you could captain the team. You could be the heartbeat of that center back pool. You could, get chemistry with those guys. If they make the World Cup, you can then go do the same, or later or when the tournament ends up being. I think it might be next year. Don't quote me on any of that. But basically, this is a chance for him to really build something with the U20. He's already cap tied to the senior team provisionally for the next few years. You don't have to worry about that. Why not? That's a good growing experience for a center back. I think that could be great. But also, being in a camp like this, there's a lot of history of young players who come in, especially now that they've given you this chance to have 26 players. There's not all 26 are going to play. You have room to bring a guy like De Fougerolles, has so much potential. You want to keep embedding him in this group, keep testing him against the Davids, the Davies, the Larens, the Ugbos in training. And then who knows, maybe that helps him, grows his confidence to show, okay, I can be a full-fledged national team member. You go to Fulham preseason, you win a spot, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, maybe this kid is ready to form a partnership with Bombito long-term. You don't know. So I genuinely think there are benefits to both. Either you keep him and you push him in that first team environment, although also it could help him a lot as a leader to go be the guy amongst that U20 team and bring some experience there.
It's very well said, Alex. Honestly, I don't know what way to lean either. You gave good points on both sides. I would just say again, just because maybe you don't see Luke DeFugeral on the pitch at Copa America doesn't mean everything that's going on behind the scenes isn't vital to his development. So I agree with you there, and I see both sides, and I don't really know. And like you said, for Hebert, basically, I think it could depend on Adekubi, and that's where we're going to go to next. Because if he gets in, I think Adekubi could have maybe a big say in that. So some players that were left out of this squad through injury or just didn't get called in. We're going to take a look at Adekubi, and I'm going to throw Ahmed in there as well, just because he's a very versatile player. Not saying he would be a backup left back option. Maybe he could be. We've seen him play wide. We've seen him play in the middle. Everyone is calling for this kid to get the opportunity in, and I'm hoping he does find his way into this roster. I think he's got a very good chance at it. And then Adekubi will be in this roster if he's fit. That's a fact. So those are two big players that could come into this team, Alex. And we can't really say too much about Adekubi just because he's injured, but Ahmed's deserving, and that makes it very difficult for some other players that we were talking to who might get the boot.
I don't know if this was intentional, but I like that you grouped the Whitecaps guys together.
Did you like that?
We have some other groupings as well, so I think that's great. Yeah, I think to start out Adekubi, you nailed it. Like, if he's fit, you have to think he's there just because he feels A, tailor-made for the system, B, the freedom he could give Davies. There's a bit of a partnership there already, although that Davies-Miller partnership maybe gives you some confidence that you can replicate that there. And of course, he gives you left back cover. And there's just so much tactical flexibility you can get with Adekubi. He's so good on the ball. I like his profile a lot. But of course, if he's not fit to go, it's just it's something where you don't really have room to push it, right? Especially when there's so many guys knocking on the door. You want to see some of these guys get a fully deserving opportunity. So that one just feels like could be a last minute decision. Maybe that comes all the way down to an hour before the squad gets named. As for Ali Ahmed, I think he has to be there. And I think you kind of saw this camp. That midfield depth is a bit limited. And he can just offer you cover all over. Because I think you could genuinely see him playing as one of the two up front in the press, like kind of be that bit of that number 10 that we didn't see this camp. It was really two strikers. You could see him in either the two wide roles. You could also see him in one of the two pivot roles. And I think that flexibility, you just have to think gives him an edge because Canada's a bit light in the midfield. You kind of saw it this camp. They could use an extra body in there, and the fact that Ahmed brings that sort of versatility, he brings you a bit something in the attack too. Canada is looking for potential solutions to kind of jolt their attack, get Jonathan David going against bigger teams. You wonder if someone like an Ahmed, who's such a good ball progressor with his dribbling and his passing in central areas. He hasn't played much centrally this year, so his progressive numbers have looked a little different from last year. He was playing more of a true 8, and that's why I think the Whitecaps should maybe look at him as more of a midfielder. That's a whole other story for a whole other day. So I think Ahmed, yeah, there's a lot of reasons for him to be in the squad. I would be very surprised if he isn't in the squad.
I agree. I hope Adekubi's fit. Both are in. That'd be fantastic for me. And like you mentioned, there are a couple Whitecaps players. Well, the next two we're going to touch on is a couple CF Montreal players, and that is Joel Waterman and Jonathan Sirois. There's not a ton. My thought process around these two is that just maybe Jonathan Sirois, I guess, gets a confidence boost, comes in as the third keeper, and Tom McGill moves on. I don't really have much of opinion on this regardless. I think honestly it might even be better for Sirois to just stay with CF Montreal, get those minutes. It's not like Tom McGill is playing right now. I don't know if you disagree, but you can get into that. He obviously has had a bit of a struggle this season as well and hasn't even played the last couple of games for CF Montreal. As for Joel Waterman, I think it could be an option for Luke DeFugeral, and I think that comes down to Jesse Marsch. Because I'm so split on whether he should go to the U20s or play with Canada, I think if Jesse Marsch knows for sure that Luke DeFugeral isn't going to play, but feels he may need a little bit more coverage for someone who could actually go on the pitch and put minutes when asked, I think maybe it makes more sense for Luke DeFugeral to go to the U20s. Joel Waterman comes in and he can be a guy that he trusts. But if Jesse Marsch trusts Luke DeFugeral to come on for the last 15 minutes and knows that because we don't have a ton of center backs, that's a true option, that's where I'm leaning maybe towards someone like Joel Waterman coming in. But I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on it, Alex, especially with Sirois, because like I said, third keeper, I think I'd rather him hopefully build his confidence with CF Montreal and keep McGill, but I can be swayed.
Yeah, I think it's something with Sirois. It's tough because I think it's something where it would be a big confidence booster to be brought in. Maybe it can help him just to be in that environment, kind of push with the St. Clair and a Crepeau in that sort of environment. I think it's worth too that I think Montreal was ready for this. There's a reason why they brought in a Sebastian Breza this offseason to kind of give them a bit more cover to say if a Sirois has a situation like this. So I think they're prepared for it. But then also, I think it's not the worst thing to just get your confidence in MLS. Yes, it's tough to miss out on an opportunity like this, but sometimes this is what you need. That okay, I don't want to miss out on any more. Let's lock in, nose to the grindstone, get back to work. So I think just because of the fact that McGill's there, I think his profile is something that could fit the system long term. Of course, we just haven't seen him play a whole lot of first team minutes, but he's out of season. Maybe this is what he needs as well, of just like get these reps in, and then he can head into Brighton. And I think he has a big year ahead, just because either it feels like for Brighton, they either have to make the decision of Tom McGill is your guy long term, and you give him some proper minutes, or you loan him out because he's at that time where you need to get him that first team experience. So I think I think McGill edges it right now in terms of that split for those reasons. But Sirois sneaking in could be the good thing. And you have to remember he's super young, and sometimes pushing the confidence of a young player isn't the worst thing, especially when it's a third goalkeeper role. You're either bringing in a mentor or you're bringing in a young guy for reps. And McGill also taps that bill, so it's not like you're swaying from that regard. And as for Waterman, you nailed it. Center back depth. I thought the center back depth was a bit light in the sense that, say, if Bombito has a struggle or maybe something happens, all of a sudden your next right-footed center back, it's, you can throw a Hebert in there, but he's mostly played on the left for St. Louis. The next best, like, right-sided option, it's pretty much Defoe's role. It's like, are you confident doing that? Say it's Argentina, 15 minutes left, or Chile for 30 minutes. That's a good question, right? It's a question to be had. I think having a Waterman in the group could make sense to shore up that depth. He brings some experience. He showed well in that TNT match, you can't forget. Could make sense to bring him in.
For our final bubble players, I have two, and it's very hard to determine what is the right or wrong decision. We have Jason Russell-Rowe, who I truthfully think deserves to be in this roster. It's just, who do you have to sacrifice? Tene Olawesi, Theo Bair? I don't really know. I feel like one of them has to probably be sacrificed because Jason Russell-Rowe has been so good for the crew for so long. He's young, he's talented. He can, we've seen him drop a little deeper too when need be for the crew. He seems like the right profile to bring to a tournament like this. And I can actually see him doing something from the bench because he also has done that a ton for the crew. The other player is Jay Nelson, who we've seen glimpses of success for Canada at the Gold Cup. Electric pace, great dribbler. I think he could fit this Marsh system as well. He can tuck in when need be. I just think he'd be a fit. It's just, again, who do you bring out? Schaffelberg, Hoylett. Unfortunately for Nelson, I just feel like he just doesn't have the edge there, but I do believe Russell-Rowe deserves to be in this roster some way, shape, or form. Alex, what do you think?
Yeah, Russell-Rowe's the real intriguing one here because it feels like he's earned it based on the season he's had. He's been electric for the Columbus Crew. He's really grown a lot as a player, started to earn more of a starting role, just showed a lot. And what you have to remember is, he's young. He has a lot of potential still. In the forward group, a lot of these guys, like a Tani Olawesi's a 2000 born. He's 24. Theo Bair's like a 99. So he's, mid-20s. Ugbo, similar situation. You bring in a guy like, Jason Russell-Rowe. He's still in his early 20s. Someone where he has lots of potential still to hit. It could make sense in that forward group where he's both earned it and you can kind of look to someone who's going to be helping you in the future. Not to say the other ones are, but I just think Russell-Rowe's age does give him a bit of an edge and something to keep an eye on. So Russell-Rowe definitely feels like there could be some noise to be made. Jaden Nelson's a wild card for me. And I just say in the sense that one thing that kind of stood out this camp is Canada's number 10 options. And I think the fact that Jonathan David kind of had to put in such a shift playing a little deeper shows that there isn't really someone that Jesse Marsh saw from the start that, okay, kind of lead the line as a 10. Osorio got a chance there, but it was only, at the end of the France game. Junior Hoylett got a chance there, similar end of the Netherlands game. I think, someone like Jay Nelson, I don't think he comes in and starts right away, of course, but I think one of the things you saw this camp, it would be nice to get someone like who can play underneath the Jonathan David to push him higher up the pitch. And Jay Nelson is young and he's got potential. It could make sense to throw him in the squad and kind of continue to push his development and push him to grow, just because that is a bit of a position of need, right? Like kind of a creative midfielder who can sit underneath the striker. So that's something to watch with Nelson. I think it's going to be tough to make it in, especially that he wasn't included, because I think as a European-based player, that opportunity for him to be included was quite easy in that camp, and you saw a lot of other European-based guys included. So I think it'll be tough for Nelson, but hey, you never know. Maybe Marsh will see something and be like, all right, maybe to bring him in for a bit of a spark.
All right, now time to wrap up the video. Alex and myself will make the roster movements. So we basically need to cut one player for sure. And if you're going to cut someone from that 27 player squad, you need to replace them. So I will start off and I'm going to actually remove 4 players from the squad. Sator, Brim, Olawesi, and Defugerol. And coming in, I'm going to have Ahmed, Atakubi, and Russell Rowe. Now, if Atakubi is not fit, then I will keep Luke Defugerol in. I just like I said, Ahmed, Atakubi for sure deserve to be there. And like I said, out of all the strikers we have, I think Jason Russell Rowe deserves to be in this side as well. So that's the movement I would do. Alex, what about yourself?
Similar, I'd say. I'd go Dominic Zator. I think I would just, the right back position's crowded. I think Charles Andreas Brim in the sense that as well, it's just so crowded up front and in terms of profile. Some other guys will want to slot in. I've also got Olawesi out, so I'm really cleaning out the front line. And I'm actually not bringing in another striker. I think the front line's already crowded enough. So I want to say let those, especially, the fact Olawesi, Russell Rowe, they can stay with their clubs and build up confidence because MLS is on, whereas Bear, Ugbo, out of season. They've had good seasons. Let them have this chance. In terms of guys in, I have Sam Adekugbe. If he is not able to go, though, of course, I have Joel Waterman ready to slot up. So I want some more reinforcement at the back. And then, of course, Ali Ahmed to reinforce the middle. So I've lightened up the forwards a bit, but I'm adding a bit of depth at the back and in the middle. But you know what? Keeping Luke Defuger all around. I went team keep him for the experience in the end here.
I respect that. Let us know down in the comments section what you guys would do, what roster movements make sense. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub. We'll see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.